Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Doogee S88 Plus. This is a rugged Android smartphone that sells for roughly $200, making it relatively affordable, and for the money you're getting some decent specs, including an impressive 10,000 milliamp hour capacity battery. That includes over a month's duration in standby time, and in regular to moderate usage, this is a phone that you have to charge once, I would say every 3 to 5 days, so it's excellent if you are away from the outlet for longer periods of time. In fact, the back here can even dub as a power bank to wirelessly charge or reverse charge other Qi compatible devices. So I can set these buds on top of the casing here, and you can see that the charging has almost immediately started. So it can act as a power bank source because of its sheer massive capacity. It also means that for this phone that starts at only around $200, it supports wireless charging on its own. So you can pop it onto a wireless charging mat to quickly top it up without plugging in any cables. Now, as a rugged phone, other elements of here include it will be waterproof, of course. You're able to dunk it in up to 1.5 meters of water for up to 30 minutes. It also is going to be temperature proof, so you can use it in hot conditions, in icy conditions, as well as the typical shock proof has these bumpers on the edges that protects it if you drop it. Now, if we take a closer look at the design, because of the super large capacity of the battery and the added military standard resistance, it's going to be a bit bulky in the hands. At 372 grams, it might be almost twice as heavy as on some other thinner phones. But overall, it definitely feels substantial. The edges, as you can see here, are all constructed out of metal, and then we have some rubber accents going on, so it doesn't feel cheap despite the low price. And we also have the camera array on the rear, which composes of a 48 megapixel Samsung GM1 sensor, along with an 8 megapixel ultra-wide and also a depth sensor. The front-facing camera, or the selfie cam, is 16 megapixels, by the way. All of these lenses are made by Samsung. Underneath the display, there's also some notification LEDs, which Doogee claims is inspired by the design of Iron Man. However, the light here is very subtle, and it seems like customization in the software is limited. The back also features stereo speakers, although I do wish the placement would be towards the front or the sides. It is what it is, and we also have access on the edge, a fingerprint scanner on the right-hand spine. I think the placement is okay as long as you're holding the phone with your right hand. Now, there's also access to the volume rocker and the power key, which are all very tactile and responsive. The bottom has a flap covering up the Type-C port and also a lanyard strap, and then the left-hand edge is where we have two customizable keys that you can map to open up whatever application you want, or also do things like turn on the flashlight at a quick command. Finally, there is a micro SD card slot as well as the SIM card tray on the edge, and supports 4G LTE bands, but it's not 5G compatible. One omission on the Doogee S88 Plus would be a standard headphone jack. Inside of the box, you also get a free hard carrying case that you can snap onto the rear, continuing with the design of being inspired by Iron Man. Now, turning the phone around, we have access to a 6.3-inch Full HD Plus resolution display. So it has a pretty tall 19:9 aspect ratio, and as a whole it is immersive, although the bezel size will be larger than if you're comparing it with, say, a non-rugged smartphone, since the glass here has to be protected by these edges and corners. It also uses a slightly more conventional water drop notch design, as compared to something like a hole punch cutout, which would have looked a little more sleek, I think, but it is what it is and still looks good enough, I suppose, for a rugged phone. There's also a notification light on the top that will glow, as well as a earpiece on the front. Now, in terms of the quality of the display as a whole, again, it's an IPS fully laminated screen, so the viewing angles are quite good. You can look at it from the edges, everything still doesn't really wash out, color accuracy is decent, and the maximum brightness is also good enough, I think, to still see even if there's a bit of sunlight hitting on it. Although it might not be the brightest screen in the world, I also appreciate some of the gestures here, like swiping down can pull down the notification shade for easier one-handed use. It is running on Android 10.0, and Doogee have installed all of the standard YouTube as well as Google apps on here. The phone, by the way, does also come with built-in NFC, so you can use this for mobile payment. Pretty much any connectivity option that you would want, this phone has it. Now, there's also a handful of other apps like an FM radio, as well as things like a sound recorder, some more utility-based tools, which Doogee have installed to go along with the whole rugged nature of the device. The phone also comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty impressive, again, for this price range, and allows you to do quite a bit of multitasking without the phone ever getting too slow. If anything, the launcher here doesn't give you a consolidated app tray to take a look at the full list of apps. So if you want something like that, you can try and install Nova Launcher that gets you the drawer back. But regardless, you can also play around with that and customize it pretty easily. So if we take a closer look at the performance of, say, the camera, the interface is relatively simple, but gets the job done. Now, one thing I pointed out in our unboxing I couldn't find was a AI scene detection mode, which is not really a huge deal, but it is one thing I want to point out. Although some special features that you do have on here include a barcode scanner, there's a dedicated night mode, as well as a monochrome black and white mode that you can all find on board. Also, when you are underwater, you can take photos and record video just by tapping on the volume keys to initialize a shot instead of relying on the touchscreen. To switch back and forth between the wide angle lens, simply tap on this icon and you can see you're able to see a lot more within one frame of the shot. And I can also change into other things like recording video, which by the way is capped at full HD resolution. So unfortunately you can't record 4K content on this particular smartphone. Now, taking a closer look at the quality of the shots, as a whole, 48 megapixel does ensure that you're getting plenty of detail, so if you do a lot of cropping in and zooming. Optimization, though, I would say can still be improved upon. I find the colors to be a little bit on the muted side. It's very accurate and natural looking, but maybe missing a bit of the color and pop, so it's not bad by any means, and especially the detail is the most impressive thing about it. The 8 megapixel wide-angle lens does capture a pretty impressive amount of content within one frame, although because it is so wide, there is a little bit of distortion at the edges, as you can see there, but it's still a fun camera to play around with if you want to capture more within one frame. Though it may not be the best smartphone camera in the world, I think for the price range we are getting a very good experience. As the light starts getting dimmer, of course the night mode does help, but it's also not going to be a rival to a more expensive device like a Pixel when it comes to the nighttime photography. But as a whole, it's a pretty decent shooter, I have to say, for the price range, and you're able to get some good enough looking images definitely to share and keep your memories. Now let's jump into the video playback and do a quick demo of the speakers on YouTube. Overall takeaway is the speaker quality is average. Again, I do wish the placement would have been on the edges or towards the front. That would be less easy to cover up, but at maximum volume it still gets sufficiently loud to hear, and reception quality on the phone is also fair. So it's going to get a lock to Wi-Fi, usually around 3 to 4 bars, and loading speeds are quite quick as well thanks to the reception plus the relatively capable Helio P70 processor. Interaction when it comes to scrolling, everything is still pretty fluid and fast, as you can see there. We can even exit out of the application and do a bit of multitasking as a video plays back, open up something else, and it still works just fine. Taking a quick look at web browsing. Now, by the way, the keyboard that they're using here is standard Gboard, so very stock, supporting swipes and gestures as well. And other things to quickly keep in mind here is the screen is also protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 5, so again, it's pretty good in terms of some durability against scratches, things like that. Again, pretty fast reception and loading speeds, and as you tap on something, it opens very quickly, even for more complex sites with lots of videos and ads. You can see it's handling itself really without too much problems or delays. Maybe a split second longer if you're comparing it with, say, a flagship, say Snapdragon 888, but again, you really shouldn't because that's many times the price of this phone, and as a whole, it doesn't get annoying or doesn't pose any issues when it comes to just casually using it. Working along here really without any problems. You can open up, from my testing, around 10 to 15 tabs, and they will still be preserved in the RAM. Otherwise, kind of the last thing to talk about really would just be the gaming performance. I would say that overall this phone is good, so you're able to get some moderate gaming done. Things that it does well include the fact that the Helio P70 really is relatively energy efficient. It doesn't really thermal throttle or anything like that, so as you're holding the phone and you're gaming even for a few hours, it never gets too hot or uncomfortable. As games open up, the experience is still relatively fluid, especially for most moderate games that you try. And yes, you can also play more graphically demanding titles, for example Asphalt 9 or PUBG, and that will still work just fine, again with the plenty of RAM and storage on here, but sometimes you may have to try and play it at the medium settings when it comes to graphics for the best best experience. If anything, the phone is just a little bit on the heavy side because of that giant 10,000 milliamp hour capacity battery. So it might be a little bit heavy on the hands if you're holding it for a long duration of time. Certainly not bad for what it is, and will definitely get you by, and still remaining a pretty fun experience when it comes to playing back games. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Doogee S88 Plus, and one thing I talked about in the unboxing is even though this is called the Plus, it's actually a slightly newer, upgraded version of the Pro. The S88 Pro is the other phone in this lineup from Doogee that they released actually last year. So the Plus edition, even though you would think the Pro is going to be more advanced than the Plus, actually has better specs. So if you are looking for a rugged phone, maybe if you're someone that wants to be a bit more rough on your device, you may accidentally drop your phone a bit more often. You want something that's waterproof, as well as something that has a really giant battery with it. This is actually not a bad option. I've seen much worse, especially for this price range. You're getting almost all the connectivity options that you would possibly want, from GPS to NFC to wireless charging to reverse wireless charging to having a camera that's not shabby for the price either. So if you want to check out more details, you can learn them in the links below, but for now that's our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been a closer look at the Doogee S88 Plus, a new smartphone from these folks here in 2021.